Everyone has a version of what Gucci is in their head. The sex, the sleaze, the drama, the glamour. That's the mythology that the house spent decades refining into something that's now become culturally symbolic. So when Demna was appointed to Gucci in July of 2025, the conversation was never going to be as simple as whether the clothes were just good or bad, but whether it was what Gucci actually needed, and whether Demna was the right designer to pull Gucci back into a position of cultural relevance and cultural dominance. So in today's video, which is part analysis and part opinion piece, we're going to be exploring Demna's transition from Balenciaga to Gucci, his opening 4 collections for the House of Gucci, and we're going to also take a look at whether or not this is the right strategy for the brand and whether or not the fashion is actually working. Let's get into it. Now, if we don't understand why Demna was actually chosen in the first place, then we're just sort of reacting to his tenure at Gucci from a purely emotional standpoint. And this for me is where a lot of the discourse around Demna's tenure at Gucci becomes annoyingly shallow. People love to place Demna into certain boxes. I've seen social media designer, I've seen one trick pony, I've seen irony merchant, and to be honest, I get why people go there. Demna is a designer that has a very particular creative approach. It's very internet aware, it's polarizing, and it's quite sinister. But when we look at the creative and business decisions that led to his appointment, things start to make a lot more sense. Kering, the multinational French holding company that owns Gucci, has been under a lot of pressure. The group has struggled, as many other luxury conglomerates have, with things like declining sales, geopolitical issues and roadblocks here in the US, things like taxes and VAT has been such an issue and hurdle for brands and many other businesses that are shipping into the country. And Gucci, which is one of their biggest assets, has also been one of their most pressing problems. When a group is fighting multiple fires like a revenue downturn, as well as a broader company restructuring and a need to stabilize the main engine, Gucci, that supports and fuels the rest of their business, the move that makes the most business sense, particularly in the fashion world, is taking someone who's already proven that they can transform a house culturally, aesthetically, and commercially, and placing them into another house that needs the exact same intervention. It doesn't guarantee that the problem will be solved, but it does guarantee that the logic is there. That logic for Gucci and Kering is Demna. Demna's rise at Balenciaga was one of the most defining creative commercial ascensions that we've seen in modern fashion. He took what was once a sleeping, historically rich heritage house and turned it into a cultural monolith that could dictate the conversation, generate obsession, and it could sell at scale. And a big part of that came from Demna's ability to shape a new visual code. Demna helped popularize ugly chic in a way that was impossible for us to ignore. Exaggerated proportions, abnormal shapes, and the use of irony as a design language. These were anti-fashion concepts that became a legitimate part of the contemporary high fashion ecosystem. It's an approach that's reminiscent of the work of designers like Miuccia Prada and particularly Margiela, a designer to whom Demna tributes for the energy and spirit that's present in him and his work. Demna had his first job after graduating from the Antwerp Royal Academy of Fine Arts at Maison Margiela in Paris. And in reflection of his time there, he said, "At Margiela, I learned more about clothes, about falling in love with them, turning them inside out or upside down. All the things that I've loved ever since I can remember. At Margiela, I learned that you may need to destroy an old garment to create a new one. This may be one of the most important things I learned from the legacy of Margiela, to destroy in order to create." Shoes like the Triple S sneaker that debuted in the Winter 2017 collection are known for revolutionizing footwear as a whole. Although they were visually divisive, they were a huge commercial success. And in that same category, you have the Panta shoes from spring 2017, which were these shiny shoe legging hybrids that featured this sort of 80s inspired skin tight spandex pants with a pointed toe pump right at the bottom. And we have to mention the snow show for winter 2022. The concept and set design for the show was initially created in reference to the ongoing climate crisis, but it evolved into into a more somber and complicated presentation in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which took place just days before the show. The collection was also a direct exploration of Demna's traumatic childhood, a period when Russian separatists who controlled the breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia bombed his family's home as part of an ethnic cleansing. As a result, he and his family were forced to flee, and they undertook a long, dangerous journey across the Caucasus Mountains as refugees. Demna says, "When I was 12 during the war, while trying to survive the Caucasus Mountains, I saw corpses of people who had been killed. Images I wish no one to ever see, let alone as a child. When you've seen that at an early age, money, fame, and the whole fashion thing can't really matter too much. Back then, I actually had something to lose, my life." On the runway, models carried these large black bags that resembled bin bags that you'd quickly stuff a few of your most needed belongings into before leaving in a very serious emergency. There were these skin-tight cat suits that had this tape wrapping effect. The tape read "caution," and it was the sort of tape that you'd imagine seeing at a crime scene or even a type of nuclear disaster. The set reminded me personally of Chernobyl and the aftermath of Chernobyl, especially with the snow, the sort of derelict and very eerie vibe that you get from being in a place like that was emulated directly and visually through the entire set design. Some of the looks featured the Balenciaga Kogol boot bag, which to me mimicked a person carrying a spare pair of shoes with them, sort of quickly slung around their shoulder. Regarding the collection, Demna says, "It was a comment on what's going on in the world. Maybe in 50 years, people will have to go to these places to have an artificial experience of a certain weather condition that we take for granted. But it turned into something else, which often happens with my shows." That's the strange power of Demna's work that we've all come to know. He creates clothes, yes, but he often creates a multiverse for those clothes to exist in. A multiverse of campaigns, references, casting, characters, celebrity, and a personal touch that gives his audience an insight into his own disposition. One thing that Demna understands better than most is that fashion and culture today exists in multitudes. It exists on screens, in edits, in memes, in discourse, and rather than shy away from the metaphorical elephant in the room, he confronts it directly, which many designers don't do. So it's like he confronts or sensationalizes these realities and then uses his instinct to convert the cultural tension he creates as a result of that into this enigmatic brand power. And as a result, Balenciaga under Demna became this symbol of culture, and Kering took careful note of that. So the next question with all this in mind is, well, what is his job now at Gucci? And I pose that question to you, to the audience. What would a successful Gucci under Demna look like to you? We can certainly take an educated guess as to what a successful Gucci under Demna looks like to Kering, which is to, of course, grow Gucci and make it culturally desirable again in a way that translates to, sales and relevance. That's the job on paper. But off paper, it's much more complicated than that, because Gucci isn't just any brand. It generates 4 to 5 times the annual revenue of Balenciaga. And as I mentioned earlier, it functions as the crown jewel of Kering's business model. And as you'd expect, Kering has all of their metaphorical eggs in the Gucci basket right now. So it really comes down to a conversation of taste. We're in an era now where everyone has access to social media and to smartphones, of course, and to, and the shows come out instantly. These collections come out instantly. They're streamed live now. Whereas back in the 90s, you had to at least wait, and there was an element of surprise as to how this show was, whether it was, quote unquote, good or bad. That was sort of delayed, but now it's instant. And everyone has become a qualified critic. And to be fair, everyone is entitled to an opinion. But for me, a lot of these critiques reduce fashion to a binary, and fashion is anything but black and white. There's also a very real business behind that entertainment. You have the production, you have the marketing, you have the operation, you have the atelier, you have the design team. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes to make those shows happen and to make these clothes a reality. So I'm more interested in the messier question, which is, does this actually make sense? And so far, I think it does, but not completely, not yet. Cruise collections have always been among the most commercially strategic parts of the fashion calendar. Historically, they were linked to leisure, travel, and sophistication for the uber wealthy. Gabrielle Chanel was one of the first designers to understand this desire. In the 1920s and 1930s, when clients started traveling to warmer climates in the colder months, it left boutiques full of seasonal items. So she responded by introducing clothes that were lighter, transitional, and suited to the getaway lifestyle. By the early 20th century, and especially by the 1990s, cruise collections became very serious strategic commercial events for fashion houses because travel itself became more globally accessible. So in today's context, when a house presents a cruise or a resort show, their main objective is to build a world or a universe even that's centered around place, identity, and destination, which brings us to New York City. On May 16th, 2026, Gucci staged their Cruise 2027 collection in the middle of Times Square, Manhattan. Gucci's relationship with New York goes back all the way to 1953. It marked Gucci's expansion outside of Italy for the first time with its first store in New York City. This was also when it introduced footwear, most notably the Horsebit 1953 loafer. And this year, in 2026, Gucci became the first major luxury brand to shut down the heart of Midtown for a full-scale runway show. Times Square is one of the most visited places in the entire world, and it's an iconic symbol of American consumerism and excess. But what makes this show location genius is that the excessive, theatrical, and impossible to ignore nature of Times Square is a very Gucci set of qualities when you think about it. Box ticked because location is one of the most important aspects for a cruise or a resort collection, and box ticked because it marked a full circle moment for the brand. The atmosphere was electric, the set was littered with these real and fake Gucci product ads, like Gucci Long Life Longevity Capsules, which was a reference to our pro-optimization and anti-aging society. On the runway, the main idea was commuter core, but Guccified. You had high sheen suits, banker pinstripes, low-rise jeans, crop tops, and this specific kind of daytime to nighttime duality of styling that feels very New York. Some of the models carried iPhones, keys, bodega bouquets, yoga mats, all those little accessories of city life for the modern New Yorker who you'd see on a daily basis. The show directly referenced Robert Lingo's Men in the Cities, which was a project created between 1979 to 1982, which is a series of photos and drawings of friends that he casted as models that he captured in these sharp, contorted poses as a result of throwing objects at them. In the show notes, Demna describes this as the fourth act of his character studies approach, bringing together the aesthetic languages of La Familia, Generation Gucci, and Primavera into one cohesive vision. And then he defines the goals of the collection very clearly, which is to build a core wardrobe using the foundations of the house's stylistic language. For Gucci, that's peacoats, trench coats, business suits, shirts, and pencil skirts, while still retaining that Italian glamour and elegance. I mean, for me, all in all, that word commercial is what is springing to mind when I hear all of this. And I don't say that as an insult, because that's the bit. Commercial is the bit. And at the end of the day, this is a cruise collection. If you're gonna be commercial, now is the time to do it. But for me, the clothes still need to transcend that framework for it to be a successful collection. And that's where my hesitation really begins. All those nods to the brand's archive are all present and there in the collection. The Horsebit loafer and the Gucci stripes, the cocoon stoles. But the clothes are arguably not that interesting, especially for what we know Demna to be capable of. Where I think Demna is strongest in this collection is in the evening wear and the more overtly glamorous looks. I feel like that's where it starts to feel more like a fashion proposition. And I say the same thing for all of the previous collections, including La Familia and Generation Gucci. And these glam looks, the seductive energy is there, the body is there, the mood is there. I also think the tailoring is genuinely superb. This is super clear in the blazers and menswear jackets. Demna's always been very strong in the menswear category for Balenciaga, and there's this very specific tension between 90s Tom Ford energy and Demna's own sculptural instincts. It feels sexy, it feels bold, a little dangerous, slightly offbeat. And when he leans into this attitude, for me, that's when we get the very best of his Gucci. And I think that's what the brand was really missing under the previous creative director, Sabato De Sarno. Sabato gave a more restrained and understated Gucci. Excellent design, excellent quality, but I just don't think that's the Gucci identity. Gucci has this litigious history, which is what makes it iconic. The bitter corporate struggles, the fights over shares, the murder mysteries, the emotional power struggles of a dysfunctional family, which can sometimes reveal the worst in people, similar to what we watched in the show Succession, for anyone who's watched it. This is ultimately what created the mystical nature of the house, and Demna channels that exact energy. Some of the worst and sometimes most complicated versions of society, Demna is able to present us with that perspective in a contemporary fashion context. And for me, that feels more aligned and it makes Gucci feel more alive. When I consider these first 4 collections from Demna's Gucci while thinking about the show notes where he describes this Cruise 2027 collection as the 4th act of his character studies approach, it reminds me of his early Balenciaga period, where even with hints of brilliance, the vision was still disjointed, clumsy, and awkward. Looking back, that fall 2016 to fall 2018 Balenciaga era was more about exploration and experimentation. And then later in the second chapter of his Balenciaga tenure, from about spring 2019 to spring 2023, we started to see his confidence grow with more experimental and cohesive designs that still maintained this avant-garde edge. So that kind of almost there energy that we've seen so far can be exciting, but it can also be very frustrating, especially when you know the designer is capable of more. I love that he still pays homage to previous Gucci creative directors, but I'd love to see it in a way that's more fresh and not overly referential to the Tom Ford era. When I think about it, I guess my overarching conclusion is that the same way Demna approached Balenciaga in a series of chapters is the same way he's approaching Gucci. It's also why I think he's perfect for Gucci, because that narrative of characters and of storytelling merges so well with Gucci. It's a house that's rooted in a history of film, and the first 4 collections from Demna is an ode to that DNA. So we don't just look at these collections individually and judge them. We look at them, or we can look at them as a chapter in a story, and that character studies approach that Demna is utilizing here gives the project a sense of continuity, and it makes me excited to see what's next. So the opinions are loud and the conversations and discourse is very loud, but at the end of the day, what's going to tell us whether or not this is working are the sales. If clients buy into Demna's Gucci, and from what I've heard and seen is already happening, then that will be the real measure of success. Not the only measure of success, but it'll be a very telling measure of success. Gucci actually did a see now, buy now in a select few stores. I actually went down to see the collection. It was a very, very interesting experience. I tried on a couple of pieces as well. There was one jacket, I'm putting it on screen right now. The jacket was honestly stunning. It was, it felt very Gucci, but it had the Demna cut. It had that Demna flair, which I absolutely love. And of course, I spoke with the sales assistants, and this person had mentioned that a lot of these pieces had sold instantly. These were pieces that were anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000, $50,000 had sold instantly. So do not be fooled by the internet. The market is certainly not ignoring Demna's vision. People may be divided on his designs and on these collections, but division and failure are 2 totally different things. And a lot of times, especially in fashion, divisiveness is just the first phase of an era that's settling into itself. When I think of this, it reminds me of Martin Margiela. A lot of the fashion critics, a lot of the French fashion critics did not understand what he was doing and did not like what he was doing. Jean-Paul Gaultier, same thing. Martin Margiela worked for Jean-Paul Gaultier. Demna worked at Margiela. I also think of the current Jean-Paul Gaultier creative director, Joan Lantic, whose work has a lot of criticism right now. I think this is just because it's something that's very new and something that's very radical. So there's an almost instinctive sense of pushback. Do I think that Demna's collections are as radical as these situations and designers I've just named? No, I don't. But two things can be true at once, and I still think that it's too early to write this off. This is a Gucci that is still growing and that's still evolving, but the wider direction makes sense to me. It feels strategic and it feels coherent. And while I do think the fashion still has more room to hit its stride, I also think that's part of the point of letting a designer unfold their vision over multiple seasons. I truly think that part of enjoying fashion is about being patient. It's something that I think, you know, fashion as a whole needs a lot more of. The best and most interesting eras of fashion are made up by a culmination of seasons. It's never just one collection. This isn't a finished Gucci, but I think it is a Gucci that's better than the one that we previously had. I'm really interested and curious to know what you guys think. You know, one of the great things about Demna is that he always gets us talking, he always gets us looking, and I think it's really, really exciting to see what he's going to do with more resources at his disposal and at a bigger house. It's certainly a bigger challenge, especially considering the brilliance that he did at Balenciaga. Even though it over time became something that we could almost expect, and a lot of us sort of really wanted something different from him, I think that's going to be part of the sentiment as to whether this Gucci tenure will be successful, whether he can innovate still with a bigger budget and with bigger resources and with a much larger house. It's much more challenging than what it was previously, but it's admirable for, you know, not just a fashion designer, but anyone to step up to a challenge. So yeah, I'm seated for this Gucci tenure. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do like the video because it really helps the channel grow. Also subscribe for more videos just like this. You can also hype the video as well. I think hyping the video kind of pushes it out to more people, especially in the earlier stages in the first few hours of the video going live. All these things help the channel grow. We are independent, so I do thank everyone for their continued support, and I'll see you in the next video. All the best.